So we're going to talk about something which is really cool and something which I've been very guilty of in the past of not doing, which is like tailoring the employee experience,
Yes,
basically.
yes,
Um,
yes, yes. I think that this is not a trend. It's something that should be being done, or I've been advocating for really for a very long time, as long as I've been in the industry. But I'm seeing this come to light a lot more, and I think over the sort of 25 odd years I've been working around the people experience, there's been lots of things that have been top of the agenda, if you like, which doesn't mean they should ever go away. But there's obviously been a lot of talk about well-being, ED&I. Stuff has come to the top of the agenda for all the right reasons. And the thing that I think I'm noticing and seeing more and more now is the individualisation of the employee experience. And I think organisations are waking up to that as well. And I think people know that they need to treat people as individuals. And it's something that's been said for a really long time. But I don't think many people really know how to do that. And you've got to really care to really try to make an effort to do that at scale. Because, if you've got one site, it's really easy to treat everybody as an individual. You're super invested as a founder or a leader in a business in employing the right people and, doing the right thing by your business and by your culture and, really getting to know people at interview stage. And you'll be really clear about what you stand for at that point because you just know and you're the founder. And I think the big question is, how do you do that at scale? And I suppose that's what I'm seeing more organisations now are far more interested in looking at. How do you do that at scale? And look, I don't have all the answers at all to that. There will be a lot more questions than there are answers from this particular episode. But I just think it's an interesting thing, and it's something that Carrero, the tech business, is working to solve, a problem that we're working to solve, and also in the consultancy business. But also I'm seeing it come out more and more through sort of studies and research and the diagnostics that we're doing. Best places to work in hospitality. It's changed over the 10 years we've been doing it, about what are the things that people value most about coming to work. And the first thing is having a positive and welcoming environment, which stands to reason. Not much to say about that one. But the second one, which has sort of risen up the ranks over the last couple of years, is working for a company that cares about its people. And I don't know how you show care at scale, but I think it's about taking an interest in each individual and what they want to be doing with their lives and where they want to be going, and sort of taking a real, I hate this phrase as well, but taking a real human approach to it. People are people, not numbers. And number 3 on that list around what people want most is a respect for work-life balance. And you've really got to know someone to know how to cater for that for them and that individual. And a Forbes study I was reading the other day, actually, much the same thing. And it's very easy, I think, at the moment to generalize about the generations and to sort of say, we need to change because, we've got Generation Alpha and Gen Y and Millennials, they want different things to what we wanted. But this piece of research I was looking at says that actually different generations have different priorities, but the thing that they all want is autonomy over the way they work, in terms of it being flexible and, if possible, the autonomy to work, the ability to work from wherever they want. Everybody wants to be recognised for what they're doing and respected for their opinions, and that everybody wants to know how they can grow and they can develop personally. And I think it is, there are variations in that for the different generations, but I think that's the whole workforce. People just want to be treated well, really. But again, the question is, how do you do that at scale?
do you think that the enemy is time for a lot of businesses? Like, it sounds like it's a very time consuming thing to do. If you haven't got tech like Carrero, let's just look at a business maybe that's got some like older systems. Maybe they're doing a lot of these
Yep.
conversations, or just on the fly, or that type of thing. And they're not recording them. It sounds like a very time-consuming thing, doesn't it, to do that differently for everybody and record it
Um,
differently for everybody and set it all up.
I think that yes, that could be the first barrier that you come across when you say to people, you need to have more conversations with people and you need to understand them and you need to take care of your people. Um, However, I think it's an excuse. I don't think it can be real because actually, we know that if you treat people in the right way, show them an individual, show them a career path, if they're working for leaders that are inspirational, if their development is individual to them, and if they sort of work within your values, we know that people will stay for longer. So, you know, you might be you might think you're wasting time by taking care of your existing people, but where you're gaining time on is not having to keep recruiting because you're
Mm.
losing those existing people and losing a culture and therefore probably losing customers as well, right? Because, if you don't have some kind of continuity of people and, the people that have been there for ages and are like, oh yeah, no, this is how we do it here and it's really good here because X, Y, Z, and any repeat clients or customers that you've got coming in, and guests, like, those people are so valuable to your organization that I would say taking the time to care about them is more important, if not more important, than what your guest experience is. There's a lot at the moment about, we spend so much time, effort and money on the guest experience and the external marketing, and that just isn't reflected in the employee experience. If you would genuinely spend investing as much on your people as you were on your guests in terms of everything that you're doing, then you will be a better place to work and the customers will come. Like
Mm.
it is a proven model.
Mm. Well, what do you think the other barriers are then? Because I think it'd be quite useful to kind of try and list some of them, because we've got time is one.
Yeah.
Why do you, even if people might know this in the back of their heads, operators might sort of like, it might be common sense to them, or they might have an inkling that, if I added more personalisation to my employee experience, I'm going to get X benefits down the line, which may be pretty soon, but slightly down the line. But there's
Mm.
something stopping them. So what are some of the other things that might be stopping them?
Um, Probably, maybe it's a belief that actually this stuff doesn't work, or that, I don't know. Maybe it's an education thing. What's stopping people? I think if you asked at C-suite level, they would all say that it's happening, or that
Mm.
there is a plan for that to be happening, and everyone is doing their best, right? So I think there's probably a bit of capability in terms of, if you walked into any hospitality boardroom and sat down and said, do you care about your people? They'll say, yes, we're a people business. People are our most important thing. But somewhere along the line, that gets lost between what's being said at a very senior leadership level when you're talking about bigger organizations to what is actually happening on the ground. And a lot of that is to do with middle managers who are getting, that's a horrible phrase as well, isn't it? But sort of your GM, AGM level, who are getting squeezed in both directions. So they're getting pressure from the top, if you like, profit, profit, profit. And this is most prevalent when you're in a VC-backed business. It becomes all about the money and people start caring less about the product and the people because there's a pressure, to do
Right.
my job, I need to deliver X. And then we go into panic. So then people don't stop, take a step back. There's a massive lack of people being able to take time out to think, which again, we're going to say it comes back down to, but I just don't have time. And that's about developing more of a strategic mindset around what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. If you are a leader in a business and you can't step back for, a bit of time to really think about the bigger picture stuff, then you're just going to keep on doing what you've always done. It's not necessarily going to work. So I think that there's something to be said for, making sure that leaders at all levels in the business really understand how important this stuff is. And, that can be done through, building it into leadership development programs, or, there's a myriad of ways in which you can educate people, but it is giving them the time to do that. But that's not the actual managers going, we don't have time to do it. That's the business saying, we will invest the time in you to make this happen. That's probably what needs to happen. And so in the consultancy business, we've got a model around the people experience, and it's really, really easy to jump in and just look at the employee journey. So from when somebody first hears about you in the marketplace right through to close, what are the touch points that you're making with that person, and how are each of those touch points are you making that individual to them? And a lot of people will jump in and start looking at that straight away. But actually, for us, the first thing you need to do is, as I say, is get the board on board. If you don't have a leadership team who are absolutely will put their hand on their heart and their money where their mouth is to say that, people are the number one thing in this business, then you're going to hide into nothing. You might as well not bother. We've turned down business before and not worked with people that we just know it's not about the people, it's about profit. And, that's just they're not organisations that we're happy to work with. And to do that, the business needs to have a really clear purpose. And I think that, again, there's still a lot of missions, visions, values and posters on walls and people not necessarily living it. And again, I'm sure we've talked about this, what does good look like in your organisation? But, if you don't have a board that's on board with the people stuff, a very clear purpose around what you stand for as a business, and then the values and the behaviours to back that up, then you can't even start on the employee journey, because what are you saying to people? Come and work here because what? We've got a list of benefits. So what? How does that relate to what we are trying to do here? One of the best businesses that we work with who's got their people culture nailed is Rose's Tie. And, you can just, all of their collateral, you go onto their website, you walk into one of their venues, you just get a feeling, it's warm-hearted, it's kind, they care about the food. I can't tell you what the values are off the top of my head. It's not my business, but I can tell you how it feels when you walk in there or you talk to any of their people. So they've got a really, really clear purpose and really clear values to underpin that. So board on board, getting your purpose and your values super, super clear. And then, leadership, it's just so important to invest in your leaders. So, we can talk about all this stuff all you like, but it has to be lived on a daily basis. We know inspirational leadership is one of the reasons that people will stay, and that's about the person you work for, not the organisation. So the person you work for, therefore, has to understand the purpose, the values, the ethos, the feel of the business, to be able to sort of keep embedding that at every touch point. And then communication, which is, a huge thing. Every time we do a survey, communication comes back as the number one thing that needs to improve, because everybody wants to be communicated with differently and everybody takes in information in a different way. And, there are some really, really, really great ways to communicate with your people and make it a really enjoyable experience. And you can do that now through technology. As you know, Liam, I think you have a system that may do something, quite like this, just make people involved in what's going on a day-to-day basis. And, there's some great comms tools out there. And, if you can't communicate as a business to everybody in your organisation, you are totally reliant on your leaders and the way that they communicate. So it's either a huge education piece about this is how we communicate here and this is how people find out what's going on. But, in the best places to work in hospitality, one of the things that could be improved within the industry, according to the people that did this survey, is that they want to be involved in decisions about their job, and they want information to be shared in a clear way. And I think tech is the only way to do that. So Carrero picks up on some of that, but not all of it by any stretch of the imagination, which is, last time we spoke, we talked about building up a tech stack where you push everything through a good comms platform. So we've got getting the board on board. We've got, having clear purpose and values, good leadership, communication. And then it's about equity. So it's really easy for people to say, yeah, we're working on our ED&I. But for me, diversity is the outcome if you are an equitable and fair place to work and an inclusive place to work. So it's about then sort of your top, those things, you have to have a plan or be getting those right before you can start dipping into the employee journey. And that's, I suppose that would be our formula on how to start working towards an environment and a culture where people are regarded as individuals and people do get to have a say.
So they're like the foundations, basically. You've got to have those in place, otherwise anything that you try to do on top will just fall down, basically.
Yeah, it's just sticking plaster. I think it's really easy to see it when you look at, when everybody, and again, quite rightly, everybody started talking about well-being in hospitality. There was a big problem within the industry. Sorry, I've got my windows open today. You might be able to hear a million children out in the park and things banging around. But there was a real problem, and I think there still is, with well-being in our industry. And a big spotlight has been shone on that over the it was happening pre-pandemic, but certainly during the pandemic. And a lot of businesses were like, yes, well-being. And you speak to them now, you're saying, what are you doing around well-being? And the response I get in is that we've got mental health first aider trained in every site. Amazing, but that's sticking plaster. They don't say to me, we have built in an ethos of caring for our people and well-being into our purpose and our values and what we stand for. And therefore, we have a culture whereby we know throughout our whole organisation that well-being is top and centre. So it's sort of making that flip around. If you're going to do anything and do it well, it has to be embedded into the culture in the first place. You can't just, say, we've now got people that can spot when people aren't feeling very well mentally. That's brilliant. We need that too. But let's look at it from a bigger picture perspective.
I think when I'm hearing you talk, it's kind of like most things, isn't it? Where there's it's almost like I guess people often use the word strategies and tactics, or strategy and tactics.
Yeah.
So it's like a strategy is like a big plan of action, which is very thorough. It's got foundations. There's like a consistent approach to it. So that's what you're talking about. And then like tactics would be just like the individual things, like having a mental health first aider in each site. That's like a tactic that is carried out because you've got this sort of wider. And I think a lot of it, and it's the same with like everything, is it? Same with marketing, for example. Like tactics would be like doing Google ads or posting on Facebook or whatever it might be. But that's not a strategy. A strategy is like, how do you tie it all together? What we're trying to achieve from all of this. And I think, I've been equally guilty in the past, and I probably still do it now, of just jumping to the tactics because, I just think you can get away with it sometimes. You just think you can get away with it, don't you? And you say you've got to save yourself some time, but you never do.
Yeah, and I think it always really resonates with me whenever I go and either attend or speak at a conference. And it's very flattering because you sit and you hear, either I'm on panels or, you're watching other people talk and you're watching everybody furiously scribble down stuff, when people, I don't know, I remember back in the day when Leon introduced, they had a central wellness hub and, people from the business used to teach yoga and people could go for free, for example, which was great. They were London based at that moment, but their culture was right for that at that moment. And what amazes me still is people listening to people that are doing really great stuff, like Dishoom, for example, they're doing amazing things at the moment, but they've been on a nearly 10-year journey to get to this place. So when they're sitting there saying, these are some of the things we do to our people, you can't just write down the things that they're doing and going, right, we want to do that, and run back to your workplace and say, we're going to do this now. I remember judging an award once, and somebody had put in their award that they do sort of meditation and breath work before each shift. Yet I know that in that particular organisation, they were really, really struggling with retention. And so they were really short-staffed, and everybody was very stressed and very busy. So actually solving that problem is about investing more in your people by getting more people in or taking less covers, not doing breath work and meditation before a shift. There's things that sound very nice, but actually, unless your culture is in the right place to do them, just don't bother. It's more disengaging. People feel patronised.
It's got to fit as well, hasn't it? It's got to be
Totally.
it's got to fit in with the people in the business and the things you've done before. It'd be very sort of obvious if a leader went to a conference and they were doing nothing on personalisation or culture before, and then to come back with a list of 5 tactics, and then starting tomorrow, you're all going to come in to do yoga for half an hour before. It would just be weird, wouldn't it? You've got to build up to that in some way.
Well, and it's the same thing with benefits as well. People think that, a list of lovely benefits, but the first thing when people say to me, what do you recommend doing about benefits? The first thing I would say is ask people what they want. And it sounds really obvious. I know a number of organisations that just don't, somebody will be like, so I heard XYZ was doing whatever it was. And, if it doesn't work for your business and your people don't want it, it's just not worth doing. And in fact, Chantal Wilson, who's at NQ64, or I think she was doing some great stuff with them. And NQ64 is a gaming venue. I don't know if you've come across it.
I've come across it. I've not been though yet.
Yeah. And brilliant, if you like gaming and arcade games and good cocktails and all that kind of stuff, great place. And by its very nature, they attract a lot of people that really like video games. And by that, the very nature of that, a lot of the people that work there who like video games happen to have tattoos. So I think she's introduced what she calls a niche benefit, where after a year, when you've been with the company for a year, you can go and get a tattoo of your choice. Now, that only appeals to some people in that particular business. It wouldn't work for the Dorchester. So that's a very, very specific example of something working really well for some people in some businesses.
Yeah.
And this whole thing that it doesn't have to be the same for everybody. It's like what will float my boat is not going to be the same as somebody else. The 2 guys I work with, they would think nothing better of going for an afternoon and playing golf. And I'm like, that doesn't interest me at all. But I understand it interests them. So let's find something where they can play golf and I can go and sit in a spa. Yay, brilliant. And again, at scale, that's really difficult. But people have got to get over this idea of it's not fair. We're talking about equity. We're talking about giving people the opportunities that they need rather than let's just provide something for everybody. And I think that's, and again, where Carrero comes into that is that it just gives you, again, that structure to be able to sit down and have those conversations.
Yeah. So let's focus on that a little bit more then. So for somebody maybe who's not seeing Carrero, how does it offer this personalisation? How does it make it easier?
Well, for example, we talked about roses. So for all their team members and managers, they're prompted to have a conversation every 3 months after the last time they had the conversation. And, if we wanted to, we could. So it doesn't have to happen at a set time. It's just making sure that it at least happens every 12 weeks. So it's personal to that individual. And some of our clients can choose whether or not they have the conversation at that time. So again, if I'm just really, really happy, I don't necessarily have to have it. So for example, Cheval, which is a managed hospitality group, they have different options every 3 months, and some of them literally just like, yep, nothing's changed, thanks very much, and they can move on. and we can ask different questions to different people at different levels. So again, if you just wanted to find out what your graduates thought, or you just wanted to find out what your chefs thought about something, you could just ask them specific questions depending on how the structure of the business is set up. And, it's the same we're working with the NED at the moment on their sort of day 1, day 14, day 45 and day 90 journeys. And it's about, if on day 1 or day 14, you sort of say, oh, actually things aren't quite what I expected, then you get the opportunity to have a further conversation. So again, it's rather than just necessarily sheep dipping people all into the same process, it's about making sure that the conversations can happen at a time that suits the person, because anybody can request a conversation at any time anyway. What I'm talking about is just at the very least, but also that people can be asked different questions depending on their, what their job is, or what their aspirations are. So there's loads we can do with it, and we're at the beginning of that journey as well. And I'm sure, as the boys keep telling me I'm like, what are we doing about AI? They're like, Joe, we use AI. We're just, it's happening in the background all the time. We're using stuff and we're doing stuff. And I think I'm expecting some magic now we have AI thing. And they're like, well, it's been going on for a while and it will carry on going on. You don't need to panic right now about what are we doing. But, as AI comes more and more into it, we'll be able to predict more and more. We've got so much data in our system that we'll start being able to predict that if you answer X, then you need to be asked Y, and that kind of stuff. So, more and more around predictions, and more about giving leaders tips and hints. If somebody answers a question in this way, then these are the things that you might want to bring up with them in a conversation. So again, focused on the conversation, but just helping people to make it individual. Because, as you say, people are short on time, and sometimes they don't have the time to think about, what advice can they give? What can they say? Which direction should I point someone if they're not feeling great?
Yeah. And who would use it? Would it be or who would own it? Would it be the manager? Would it for their site, or would it usually be somebody in head office for?
So it can be owned. It's owned at all levels. So from a HR perspective, the teams, we usually work with the teams to decide the cadence at which people are sent stuff or pushed out notifications. But a manager or an employee can go into their system at any time and request to have a meeting about anything that they want to on the system or anything they've answered before. So let's say that, suddenly my mum, 2 weeks ago, we had a conversation where I was willing to relocate to New York. And actually, my mum has unfortunately just had to go into a care home, and now I'm not going to be able to do that anymore. I can just go in and update the system. Or if I think, yeah, do you know what? I didn't think that when we talked about my behaviours or my KPIs last time, it was a true reflection, and I've worked really hard over the last month to change that. I can now go into the system and update it. And from a manager point of view, if you think somebody's done something really well, or something's changed, or you want to give someone some feedback and have a conversation around it, you can do that as well. Again, does that happen? Not as much as we'd like it to. It tends to still be HR pushing stuff out, but that's where we should be. Whether you're using our system or a different type of system, you should be able to update stuff on demand and understand where you are in your career and have visibility over that. So, openness, transparency, visibility, all that stuff, rather than filling in a form once a year and it putting in a metaphorical filing cabinet somewhere, never to see the light of day again, which I think is what happens with a lot of, whether they're online or not, happens with a lot of reviews. And some clients in our system still, that is still the case. It'll be a login once a year, but that's just the thing that I just want to move people away from as quickly as possible.
Yeah. So I guess like that is the only way of doing it at scale, right? So, is using tech is the only way of doing it at scale.
I think so, yeah.
Obviously there's massive benefits there, isn't there, for the employee and employer. But as you were talking, I was thinking I guess this is the only way you're going to be able to use this data really as well, because like you say, if you do it by pen and paper, or a lot of people don't record these conversations at all, do they? And then literally nothing's happening with them. But what can you tell us about the reports and stuff inside Carrero that add to this personalisation?
I mean, you can drill down. So from a manager perspective, I can see everybody that reports to me directly or indirectly. So let's say I'm a GM of a hotel or a operations manager. I can go and have a look. The whole thing about our system, it's open and transparent. We're never saying this is anonymous. If you're writing in it, it's because you want people to know how you're doing and vice versa. So you can drill right down to look at, have you got somebody who's at high risk of leaving? So, I'll have a look at that person. Okay, so how does that stack up against how they're living our values and how they're performing against their KPIs, goals, objectives? And if you've got a high performing person that is at a high risk of leaving, then it's very easy for a leader or for the business to be able to say, well, let's go and have a conversation with that person before they do leave. So, and the same when when it comes to well-being, or we can ask around sort of how happy people are in their role or what they want to do next. You can sort of really start to pick up on, okay, there's a trend happening in this particular site. Let's go, we probably need to do a bit more work in this area, or this particular group of people in a site, or this particular individual. If somebody's saying they're not happy, then let's make sure that has been picked up and make sure there has been a resolution and that there is an action point. So, it becomes that everybody can have their own goals, have their own sort of performance metrics, have their own development plans. And, as we said, one of the things that people want is growth and development, and to know that people care about them. So what better way of that is to sit down and say, okay, wherever you want to get to, whether that's with us or not, here's some steps to help you in that direction. I saw something on LinkedIn this morning, it's the marginal gains. It's the 1% better every day, not the big once a year conversation then nothing ever happens with. It's what are you going to do today to improve? What are you going to do today to be a little bit better at your job? And also, if you've got no interest in being better at your job, but you're just really good at it, that's okay too. Not everybody's on some big, massive climb up a career ladder. We know certainly where there is a generational difference in what people want from work is that the generations coming into the workplace are much more interested in a sort of gig, the gig economy, having more than one thing going on at the same time, and wanting to not necessarily do jobs for life. I mean, in my day, I think my dad, baby boomer, he worked for 2 companies in his whole life.
Wow.
He did amazingly well, moved up through those businesses, but it wasn't a thing moving around. And even for me, Generation X, if I look at someone's CV and see they've moved every 2 years, there's still something in my head that goes, what? Alarm bells. And that's not the case anymore. It shouldn't say alarm bells. I do remember I was very fortunate, first world thing going on here, but I had a nanny when my kids were little, and I remember employing her. And at that point, it was very much like you need to look for people who've got good career stability, especially if they're coming in to look after your children. I remember very seriously in her interview sitting there and saying to her, so can you tell me, what, you seem to move on quite quickly. And she literally looked at me and went, yeah, the kids go to nursery. I was like, oh yeah, that would be a really good reason, wouldn't it? She stayed with me for 12 years, so.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Must have done something right.
Yeah. But I think that's a really, really super point, isn't it? Because I think leaders can often want their people to have the same values and thoughts as them. Do you know what I mean? So like if you're either if you're in an older generation and you've got that mindset where people should stay for a long time, or I think, and also I think a linked problem is leaders just need to understand, especially owners, that employees just don't care about the business as much as they do, and they shouldn't.
No.
It's not their business.
No, and therefore, actually, oh God, my menopausal brain, his name's gone out of my head.
Yeah, James, someone is him.
Yeah, James, yeah. we all know who he is. And he said on a podcast once, one of the biggest mistakes he made was realizing that not everybody cared as much as he did about his business. And that's the perception of him, therefore, as being this, you know, the negative side of that perception around who he is as a person and his business was just because he was so driven and he cared so much, and he just assumed everybody else did because he did. And he, you know, I think he learned that the hard way, right? As a lot of us do. And you take it really personally as a fact. If somebody wants to leave your business, it's like, what? But this is my baby. Why would you want to leave? Why would you want to leave? But yeah, but the important thing about that is they may not care as much about as your business as you do, but find out what they do care about. Because if you find out what they do care about and you tap into that, then you'll keep them anyway.
And to finish on that, you should be using Carrero to do that.
I mean, obviously.
Superb.
Why not?
Brilliant. I love that. It was really interesting. I've definitely learned a lot. I think me, like all leaders, can definitely improve in this. So thank you for your time. Brilliant. Super insights.
Pleasure. We'll speak to you soon.
See you next
Take
time.
care. Bye. Bye.